Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are running neck and neck in the latest Quinnipiac poll. Joining us right now to talk more about the race and what's at stake is Delaware Senator and Hillary Clinton supporter Chris Coons. And Senator, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Becky.
So we are just 40 days away from the election, but we are only about 3 or 4 days away from the government running out of money. Why don't we talk about that first? Because I think it caught a lot of people off guard that this bill didn't make it through the Senate yesterday, and we are suddenly looking at a potential government shutdown this weekend. First of all, how did you vote on the bill?
I voted against the procedural motion yesterday because, frankly, we have had months and months in which the Republican majority could have and should have addressed the Zika crisis or addressed Flint's water challenges. We have water problems, water quality problems, not just in the city of Flint, but across the country. And President Obama asked us for more than $1 billion in funding to address Zika back in the spring. The fact that the Republican majority in the House did not send us bills months ago that funded these two priorities was why a number of Democrats, me included, opposed moving forward with our continuing resolution that would fund the government for the next couple of weeks until we come back from the election break.
You know, it's been a huge frustration for a lot of people, myself included, that we haven't seen things like the Zika funding, things like Flint water, but you're willing to shut down the government over this?
Frankly, if we're not willing, if we're not able to do our jobs as members of Congress, then we shouldn't be proceeding with the government. This is the sort of moment that Democrats have been saying we would get to this point for months and months. I've got teenagers. I don't know if you've got children. You get to a point, Becky, where you've said, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a disagreement. We've got to resolve this. And eventually you have to put your foot down and say, it's just unacceptable for us to have thousands of cases of children poisoned by lead in their water, of pregnant women suffering from Zika without taking responsible steps to address it.
So what do you think the odds are of a government shutdown? Is this something that we should...
I think they're very low. Becky, I think the odds are very low because, frankly, the last time the Republican majority shut down the government of the United States for 17 days, they were hammered by the electorate because they control the Congress, they control the House and the Senate, and our inability to come to a positive resolution on these basic public health issues is something that I don't think they're going to risk this close to a general election.
Let's step back from partisan politics for a moment, because every time we get into this, it does lead to a lot of finger pointing. What do you think has really gotten us to the point where we are talking about a government shutdown potentially every year, where people can't work across the aisle for things that seem like they are very clear issues that are of importance to the American public at large? What happened?
Well, Becky, partly we've got a lack of a positive relationship of trust between our leadership. We've also got a lack of a process here in the Senate whereby the Republican majority can simply move forward over the objections of a very small minority. There's actually a very small number of senators that are holding up progress on our appropriations process. But because of the rules of the Senate, we get to a point where any one individual senator can object, and that prevents us from moving forward. I continue to work with Republicans and get bills passed. The president signed 2 bills that I helped author with a Republican co-sponsor, one in July, one in August. And I'm optimistic another one that I did with Senator Flake will be signed into law this week. There are senators, Republican and Democrat, continuing to work together. Literally just before this shot began, Senator Gardner of Colorado walked by, and I told him I'm going to join him as a co-sponsor in a bill we're introducing this week. So there is positive work being done here. But when it comes to fundamental budget issues, we still remain pretty far apart. Think about how hard it is to grasp that we don't have a functioning export-import bank. And that's really because there's one senator who refuses to allow members of the Ex-Im Bank board to be confirmed.
Which senator is that?
Senator Shelby.
Okay, so it does sound like there's still some cordial relationships, people who are working back and forth. I think the American public would love to see more about that. Let's pivot back to the election and get back into partisan politics at this point, as much as I hate to do it. We are facing an election that has been a very bitterly fought election, a very uncivil election in a lot of ways, and a lot of people in America are up in arms about this. They're not going to be, half of America is not going to be happy no matter what happens in 40 days. How do you deal with that when partisanship is running so high And whatever happens in this election is probably not going to resolve that.
Well, Becky, you mentioned just a few minutes ago the volatility in the stock market over recent days, the volatility over recent weeks. And I think that's because when the average American looks at Donald Trump, when the average business leader or investor looks at Donald Trump, they see someone who is unpredictable, where they don't really know what his plans are or what his policies would be. I watched closely the debate between Secretary Clinton and Donald Trump last night, or Monday night, and I came away thinking that he's frankly unprepared for the role, that by temperament and by policy proposals, he is just simply unstudied, unlearned, and unprepared. That's why I think.
Is that what you thought going into the debate, though? I mean,
it reinforced a strong impression I already had. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, Becky, and things he has said about our NATO alliance, about our potential future relationships with other countries, his stance toward Putin and Russia, have all struck me as both ill-informed and potentially dangerous positions. CNBC was reporting this morning that not one CEO of Fortune 100 companies is publicly supporting Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that was a Wall Street Journal story from the weekend.
I think that says something about whether or not he's laying forward the kind of plans that would lead to the sort of predictable future, the sort of positive agenda for growth for this country that would be embraced by those who lead our largest companies.
So having said all that, if he actually does win the election, how do you work with him and with the other side? I guess this gets us back to this point of a government that is much more divided than one that can potentially work across the aisle and get things done.
That's right. Becky, I've worked hard to build real relationships, positive relationships with Republican colleagues in the House and Senate. Just yesterday, I had lunch with a House Republican from Pennsylvania with whom I had traveled to Eastern Europe this summer. That's part of how we can begin to bridge this divide that is so sharp in this body. But frankly, the American people also need to hire folks for the Congress through this election who want to get things done, who want to listen to each other rather than just giving partisan speeches and threatening to shut down the government. I do think it's time for the voters to send us a strong message that we need to work together to get the business of this country done.
Well, Senator Coons, I want to thank you for your time. And sorry, we went a little off topic from what you were expecting, but we do appreciate your joining us and playing along.